I need some traction. You need some traction.
Check out a list of all our webinars on the Boast.ai website or the Traction website. We've got it on our YouTube channel there. Please check that out. Subscribe. We're constantly bringing great content to you every day. So based off of that, we got another great one here today. I was super excited about this one. Super amazing presentation today from Julie Persofsky from Winning by Design on customer success. I think it's a neglected topic that me, myself, being in sales, everybody talks about new customer acquisition and not enough about the customers you have, how to grow the customers you have, especially if you're up value and you're more enterprise and larger LTVs on your clients. You're definitely going to want to hang on to this one and share this with some other people. Julie, how's it going? How are you doing today?
Doing pretty fabulous. As people are coming in, I want to get people used to the chat box, because we're going to be using that a lot. So as you're rolling in, people who are already here, I'd love for you to throw into the chat. Here we go. What is it that you miss most from our pre-COVID times? I'll tell you, I miss date nights at the movie theater. It was a nice little getaway that I would do once in a while, and that no longer exists. What about everybody else? What do we miss from our pre-COVID times? Just throw it in the chat. Let me know. The Jim totally traveling. I do not miss traveling, actually. Oh, hugs. I'm sorry. Virtual hug for you. Customer success, you mentioned it's an overlooked topic, and I can't begin to stress that even more. And one thing that's been very interesting since the start of COVID is we've always been focused so much on new logos, new revenue. It's all about sales. It's all about that next win. And customer success gets overlooked. And as a result, when you think about how you talk about customer success in your organization, or those top three questions that CEOs ask their CSMs or their customer success lead, it's what's our churn rate? Are our customers happy? And how can we cut costs in CS, right? How often do you hear that question, or for the CEOs in the room, do you ask that question? Feel free to contribute in the chat as though we're having a bit of a conversation, right? It's a pretty common thing to talk about. But as a result, the responses are often this sort of standard response. It's reactive, it's repetitive. Okay, let's try this. Let's try changing our pricing. Let's run an NPS campaign. Okay, maybe we need to reduce our headcount. We need to, do all these things. And what happens is we are in a 101 crisis. And it leads us, this is our 101 crisis playbook. And this playbook continues around and again. We try let's take a look at this. We try the same thing over and over again. Let's look at tiers. Let's look at NPS. Let's change pricing. Let's change terms. We're going around and around. And though it might not look like we're going in circles, we are going in circles. And what that reminds me of is, if anyone's ever seen this concept, it's the Penrose. Has anyone seen this before?
Yeah, it's on my feed all the time.
It's on your feed. What's unique about this is it's the Penrose stairs that keep going around and around in circles. You keep going somewhere, but you never get anywhere. And the problem, if we go back, the problem in CS is we keep trying the same things over and over and over again. And we keep on ending up in the same problem. We keep going to cut costs. We keep ending at the same place. Now let's look at the sales 101 playbook, right? We're not alone, right? CS isn't alone. When COVID hit, the whole organization was hit. All revenue-facing teams were hit. So let's look at the sales 101 playbook, okay? Their leads have dried up. They're asking the CEO, what do we do here to get more revenue? What are we going to do in order to get our sales team to make their commissions, to hit their numbers? And they go to customer success and they steal that revenue, right? They're fleecing that revenue from their easiest targets. It's existing customers. What can we get from them? And following that quick success, what we're finding, and I'm talking to sales leaders, is they're saying, you know what? We want to own all revenue. And so here we have two 101 crisis playbooks in the heart of COVID. And we continuously are running in the same circles, getting nowhere. And as a result, we have to think differently. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. It's just not going to happen. So what do we have to do differently? Let's take a look at, let's take a bit of a closer look. I want to zoom in to what's really behind customer success. Okay, so we think customer success, starts with the number of customers, ends in lifetime value, and in the middle is this block. There's this box. Something is a black box, right? What's in this magical box of customer success? So here's what we think it is. You have new revenue from existing customers. Okay, so you add that. Then you add in expansion revenue. Then you subtract what you lose from churn. Someone mentioned in the chat box, churn, right? So you're adding in your expansion revenue, you're subtracting your churn, and what you end up with is the sum of your net new revenue metric. Does this make sense to everyone? I wish I could see a thumbs up. If it makes sense, you could give me like an okay in the panelists. Thumbs up. Thank you, Kim, for the thumbs up. I like seeing faces normally. All right, so we have an additive model. And what this means is that, we're in this volume metrics, right? Have you ever been asked, how many customers have we gotten and how much churn have we had? Right? We're constantly hearing all these. I bet you all have heard that. And now we also are trying to measure things like customer love, right? What's our NPS? What's our happiness score? But NPS doesn't actually have any scientific impact or correlation to any metric in the business other than the NPS score. That's a hot topic that I've been talking about with a bunch of CS leaders, with this love-hate relationship with NPS, because you got to do it, but it also doesn't necessarily correlate to anything that's happening in your business. And then the final metric, we look at, what's this all going to cost us? Okay, so it's customer success and additive business. We're constantly adding and subtracting here and there. And is it additive? And is success a volume metric? And if so, what volume do we care about, right? Is it NPS? Is it churn? What volume metric are we looking at? Let's take an even closer look at the box. Are you ready? What if we're looking at the wrong model, right? Because we keep doing this additive and subtracting and everything and ending up in these circles. What if we add a third dimension? In the customer success, we're going to add this new dimension. So here we have customer success, and it consists of at least these three functions, right? This is pretty standard stuff. You onboard, you use it, you drive impact, you renew, and you expand. Each of these functions, each of these elements has its own volume metric. You onboard, so the number of customers that you sign up, they're going to onboard. Typically, what you get is the number of so each of these functions has its own conversion rate. And what happens is, if you look at onboarding, okay, so 100, you get your new revenue customers, they onboard. The percentage of those who go live after onboarding is your CR5. And why that's important is because, you think that number should be 100%, right? You sign up, a number of customers, 100% of them should onboard, but that's not always the case, right? You think about a low value product. Let's say it's a monthly $30, $100 a month. If you expect to be able to onboard and get first value within the first 30 days, if that doesn't happen, chances are they're going to leave before they even onboard. So you need to make sure, just a side note, you need to make sure that your onboarding process matches the commitment and level of effort required based on the product, and start measuring that. So we look at that. So because of this conversion rate, the higher the value, the higher the revenue, the higher the rate should be. And just another tip, you want to schedule the onboard. That's why scheduling the onboarding before the close or before you close the deal is a great way to increase that conversion rate. So success is based on this multiplying this conversion rate. Let's look at the next function around the next volume metric. So you have CR6, it's about multiplying your first CR5 by CR6, around this number can be your churn or your retention number, and then your CR7. You keep multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. All right. Now the next, if you look at all those arrows, do you see any additions? There's no subtraction, there's no math, there's no subtractions. It's all multiplication. So CS is not an additive business. It's a multiplicative business. Now we have our LTV. And if you'll notice, if as you continue to multiply, multiplying by multiples is the product of is an exponential impact. Okay, I want to show you what I mean a little bit, because I'll tell you, math is not my strong point. And if any of you have been co-teaching or sort of homeschooling any of your kids, you'll know, you might be reminded of what elementary or high school math is like. And it's a lot harder than we might remember. This has taken a long time to come together. So let me show you what I mean, okay? So if we think about our business as additive, right? X plus Y, this is what we get. This is how we've been thinking about our business. Now you think about that it's actually X times Y, multiplicative. This is where you start to see some real value. But because we cover multiple functions, because we cover those 3 dimensions, those 3 elements, you're multiplying by multiplying by multiplying with churn and expansion, you're actually getting exponential growth. And you get that because every single scenario you have, you get a new logo that may churn, or maybe it's just a downgrade, but you upsell and you expand and you cross-sell. So you're getting multiple functions to multiply. Now, if you notice, we talk about LTV, and I'm putting quotation marks around LTV, because in customer success, LTV isn't necessarily a one-time function. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at what I mean by that. That line doesn't even happen because in customer success, it doesn't operate in a unidirectional model. It loops back, right? All of a sudden they renew. They get an upsell. You get a 10% upsell mid-year contract. It loops back into new revenue, into usage. If it's annually, it loops back by every year. If it's a monthly contract, it loops back every single month. And so what you get is this constant, is a compound impact, and it continues to loop back. So here's a question for everyone to make sure that you've been following, okay? So if it's an annual contract, a 3-year contract, how many times does it loop back? Throw in the chat window. I want to make sure you're all following me and listening here. So the question is, it's a 3-year annual contract. How many times does it loop back? Does anyone want to throw in the panel? Okay, Frank, 3 times. All right. Yes, you're right, 3 times. Okay, now let's think about this. I'm going to ask again. On a monthly contract, so it's a 3-year contract on a monthly. How many of you know how many periods that is? Perfect. 36 months. So here now you have is a number to the power of 36. Let's go back to the model I just showed you, right? So we had adding multiple exponential. Now we know that x to the power of something is really powerful, right? It gives you an even bigger number. Now what happens if you do that again, right? So you do x to the power of y, but then you do it again, adding another period, and then adding another one, and another period, and another period, and another period. This is compound impact. Could you imagine if every single month you add just 1% of incremental revenue? This is the hockey stick that you get. This is why compound impact is so powerful. And we don't even think about it that way because it's a little bit hard to visualize. But I'm hoping that you all, yes, thank you. I can introduce the headache now. I hope you can all start to realize how powerful effective customer success can be.
And
To
Julie,
give
this
you,
is super interesting, just to jump in quickly, because for those of you who are more familiar with the sales process, everybody's kind of started to really understand how exponential the sales process is when you can kind of shrink your, you know, your levels when you're moving through your sales cycle. And the same philosophy applies to customer success. It's just, this is just not talked about enough. And I'm so happy that you're presenting this today. Sorry, just wanted to jump in with that.
no, thank you. I'm going to give everyone a real life example. Okay. So think about Amazon, right? Everyone, especially with COVID, everyone's buying things on Amazon because we can't go into stores. This is why Amazon is so incredibly valuable, because look at your cart history, look at your order history, right? Every single month you're adding, you think you're just adding a little bit here and there, but in fact, the exponential growth is month over month, because every single month you're multiplying more and more and more in your cart. You think it's just adding up, and in fact it's multiplying, and the impact of their business is this compound impact, which is why they're so valuable. Before I show you the model, before I get into it, I want to get into a couple of real life scenarios that we experience in our companies. Okay, but before I get that, I want to take a moment, because I just threw a lot of information at you in like 15 minutes. And this is, this stuff we've been working on for months and months. What's one key takeaway you've gotten so far out of the first 15 minutes? Can you throw in the chat? What's one key takeaway that you've had from the first 48 slides? Anyone want to share? Russ, what's one key takeaway you've had?
I mean, the exponential growth of just, making sure that you can apply best practices to each part of it, and dissecting your customer success down to like the minute level.
Yeah, every single component, every single small improvement you make is an adjustment and multiplying that. Customer success is a multiplying effort. That's interesting there. Shorter period, I love this. Shorter periods are more valuable sometimes, right? It depends on the contract. It depends, right? If you're planning on renewing, if your period is too short and you don't have an opportunity to drive impact, then you're going to lose them. And so a lot of people out there provide these blanket statements around, this is what your model should look like. You should have X number of CSMs for this number of revenue. This is how much time it should take, etc. But you can't just provide these blanket statements, because you have to look at what is going to happen in your business and how your customers need to operate in order to go back and drive onboarding, first value, usage and impact, renewals, and expansion. These are really, really great takeaways. Thank you so much for sharing. You have no idea. It's great to see that these are the takeaways you're getting. It's great to get that feedback. It's motivating, it's inspiring. Let's look at some basic customer success situations. All right, we're gonna throw another question out there. It's a mini survey question, okay? So how many accounts per customer success manager should they have when the contract size is around 100K per year? Just throw it out there. A, B, C, or D. Under 25, how many should you have? Under 25, between 25 and 50, 50 to 100, or over 100? We're getting a B. Lots of Bs. Bs if they're healthy, 1A. Lots of Bs. Okay, let's take a look at what this looks like. Okay. If we actually break down the number of meetings that happens, okay? So if you look at the number of monthly, quarterly, annual meetings, and ad hoc meetings, those are like, all of a sudden you have a new decision maker, all of a sudden they've asked for a product feature, or there's a bug, all those things happen. How many do you have per year? And approximately how many hours do you need to both prepare and then have that meeting? What you get is a total of about 70 hours of meeting time per account. If you look at actually how much time you have, how much time, work hours each CSM has, they have 2,000 work hours in a year. That's a pretty well-known number, but productivity is around, you only get about 70% of that. The remaining 30% is used on you know, admin time, internal meetings, all that stuff. So we tend to get 40%. That's 1,400 hours. That means you get 20 accounts per year if you factor it in all the meetings. I see replacing Sally with AI. You can manage a ton. I mean, get AI that can actually do it effectively, and we have a good argument there. So people who guessed A, there weren't a lot of you. We've got under 25 accounts per CSM at this model. Okay. Let me scientifically prove to you that with having your CSMs only manage 20 accounts, you can actually make more money than if you have one CSM manage more accounts. What I'm going to show you is the core of the message today. And when I finally figured out the mathematical model, I was like, literally, I was like, oh my God, I was blown away. Okay. So this is a very typical scenario, right? If you look at, you know, what we find is that, so we have Meg, she's being asked to cut headcount. We're being asked to cut headcount all the time, right? So a typical CSM around 80K US, you can argue that here and there, but on average, what's the impact going to be on the budget? I'm going to take it to the survey again, take it to the conversation again. What's the impact to the budget? 80K, 100K, $1 million, or $4 million in revenue? I got a lot of D's here. Give me a few moments, throw it in there. Okay. So we have one CSM managing 20 accounts, and that revenue is $6.1 million. Okay. But your business is going great. You're adding more accounts. What do? So you hire a new CSM. Amazing. All right. So now you have another CSM. You're managing 35 accounts, and that revenue is $10.7 million. One thing to just keep in mind, why are we not doubling it? Why is it not 40 accounts and 12.2 million? It's because the CSM's new. They can't manage as much at the start. So we're buffering for that. Okay. So we have a delta of an increase of about $4.5 million. But now things aren't going so well. COVID hit. We had to lay off people, right? And so we're looking at who can we lay off? And we're saying, we've got our CSM here. We can cut this person. We'll save 80K. And we should stay close to the 10.7 million, right? Well, let's take a look at this. If we're going to increase the number of accounts per CSM, what's going to happen is we're going to see churn increase, or retention decrease. If you're actually going to do the math, you do it on a retention number. Because as accounts get less and less attention, they're going to churn more and more. You can't stay on top of things as much. You can't catch things. You can't catch the fact that a new decision maker's happened. You can't catch the fact that they've had a strategy change, or their business has been hurting and you haven't had time to have more strategic meetings with them. Upsell numbers are impacted. Again, you don't have time when you're doing your your monthly or your EBRs. You don't have as much time to do your prep. You don't have as much time to do discovery and get those right stories to try and frame those upsells. And then the length of the contract, those number of periods, are not going to stay the same. They're going to decrease. And your LTV is going to be impacted. Because of the compounding effect, this is going to create a disproportionate amount of impact on your LTV. And as a result, the revenue is going to have you're going to have a significant impact on your revenue, right? Before, we saw 35 accounts with 2 CSMs was $10.7 million. Now with 1 CSM, you're looking at 6.75. Nearly double the accounts, hardly any impact on the revenue. So what you saved in that $80,000 a year headcount, you've lost almost $4 million in lifetime value. We go back to this question, right? If you're being asked to cut the headcount, what's the impact? It's 4 million. Too often, I'm talking to CEOs, boards, and they don't see this math. How many times are executives going to be asked, how can we cut costs in CS? Because our costs are too high. But what we're not looking at is the real impact on the business. And if you're going to take away one thing from this conversation, it's about understanding how to effectively convey this message. I'm going to go through one more example. Or do we need, Russ, you tell me, do we need to pause for a second for questions? Do we need to take a break? Or should I think
we should keep going here. I think, unless we see something else coming in here.
I'm getting some questions around the around some of the factors in the arbitrary. I'm seeing some questions, so why don't we pause here for a minute? I'm gonna escape and just give us a moment to just talk for a second. I'm seeing some questions come in. I think it's a good time to just take a moment and talk about it, and then I can come back to some of the to what to do next. Because what do we do about it, right? Do you see some questions coming in, or do you want me to look at the chat?
Yeah, you know what, and I had an interesting question just around, and some of the assumptions you made there, just around the assumed LTV for a customer and the number of accounts they should hire. And like, do you guys like prescribe, like, based off of, your LTVs, $1 million or 2 million, how many accounts they should cover? Or is it based off of the amount of upsell you're expected within an account, the potential within an account? Is it all, do you ever do like pods within your customer success teams? I know these are like loaded questions here, but.
Yeah, so we do pods all the time. Let me even just walk you through. I'm seeing a lot of questions here on our metrics, and I'd like to even just walk you through for a minute, because the metrics we used are based on looking at over 500 customers and seeing their revenue and seeing the trends. And so, but is your point, right? Are they arbitrary? Look, at the end of the day, you can adjust some things here and there around the number of work hours you spend, right? Is it going to be, how many EBRs are you going to be having? How many annual, how many workshops are you going to be having? And so we can change around these numbers a little bit, but at the end of the day, the impact's the same. And so I think it's, and if you actually look at it on a monthly contract basis, if you look at it less, the number of accounts are way higher, the meetings you're having are way less, and the metrics around churn and whatnot are actually are not as significant, right? So you're not seeing as high churn, your churn is going to be less significant as an overarching of all of your customers. Okay, so I think the important message to see is it's not, even if you play around with the metrics, right? And if you look at churn, right, it's 6% churn. We're actually looking at as a retention metric when we're actually when we're multiplying it. So it's actually 94% retention, which isn't such a significant percentage base, over 9%, which is a 91% retention. So when you look at how you multiply it, the delta between those numbers isn't as big. And so if you change it by 1% here or there, the result isn't going to be any different. And I think that's an important thing to get across when people are challenging some of how we factor some of those numbers. The math stays the same, even if you change the numbers around a little bit. Sorry, Russ, you asked a question. I jumped to this. At the end of the day, this is the challenge that we often see. We often see people coming out saying, "Oh, your metric should be X number of clients per CSM or per pod." I love pods, right? I think when you have a huge upsell potential, I was working with a client almost about a year ago, actually, and they had massive upsell potential. And because of that, they actually had a bunch of people working the account, but they weren't coordinated as a pod. So we redesigned everything and we said, look, you need your AMs, your strategic AMs to act as the pod owner and really drive the strategy for the whole organization. And then each component of that pod, onboarding, services, customer success, all had their unique roles and responsibilities. And it was a matter of breaking down, what does it look like in order to have a successful, in order for this customer to be successful? And this is the missing component. And this is where you actually can't just throw these sweeping numbers out at things, right? You can't just say, this is the ratio. You actually have to look at what components go into the having a successful customer outcome, right? What meetings do you have to have? I've listened to thousands of EBRs. Part of our process is we listen to call reviews, thousands of EBRs. And the number of times customer success managers listen to, present numbers, here's the results, show a bunch of product features that have been released in the last 6 months or a year, and then move on to sort of, what's next, as opposed to doing discovery around what impact they're looking to achieve, what strategy has changed in their organization, and matching the functionality that the company is built to the impact that that customer is looking to achieve, and then having a conversation from there. That doesn't happen. That takes time. You have to properly prepare, you have to do your research, and you have to prepare for that meeting, and you have to do this training of that CSM in order to give them that skill set in order to be able to do that. Once you know all those components that needs to go into what a successful customer looks like, and how to best get that incremental revenue from the number of contract length, the upsell potential, then you can start to equate how many accounts that CSM should have and what that revenue per CSM should look like. But you really can only do that once you've factored in all those other elements. It takes work, and people just want a really quick answer. They want to say, like, what can my blanket statement be? But if you just do that, then the problem is that you're, 6 months, a year, 3 years down the line, what we're finding is that your churn numbers aren't where you want them to be, or your retention numbers, or your upsell numbers. And then we're back in that whole Penrose, stairs case again, where it's like, we just did all the same stuff and we're back where we were before. Yeah, we're expecting different results. That doesn't work that way.
Yeah, great answer there. Do you find within customer success, like you just talked about, the skill set required and the skills you just described, you seemed like you need to be pretty proficient in the field. Do you find that a lot of your companies haven't leveled up quite enough and are trying to skip steps by just like not leveling up and hiring the right talent for those roles?
There's hiring the right talent, and then there's also like investing in that, right? So, I really challenge everyone to look at the amount of dollars spent on sales tools and sales training. Now look at the dollars spent on CS tools and CS training. They're not going to be equal. They're going to be like a third or a quarter per person.
Right.
Yet the profit potential on the CS side is exponentially so much greater. It doesn't make any sense. Let's go back to what to do about it a little bit here. I'm just going to, give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen again. If I can find my screen again, give me 1 sec. While I'm pulling this up. So I want to talk a little bit about what we should do about it. And then, hang on, I keep doing this and I'm not sharing my screen. Sorry, let me try one more time.
There we go, looking good.
Yeah, we're looking good now. Just gonna throw it into presenter mode and give myself. Okay, so what are we gonna take about it? This was a good question that you asked me, Russ, in terms of a segue. Okay, so what are we gonna do? So we're going back to the beginning where I said, what are the questions that CEOs ask their customer success leaders? We need to change the conversation. It's not what's our churn rate, are they happy, how can we cut costs? It's about how can we generate more profit for the company. And it's not just CS in a silo, it's the company. The profitability on our company relies on customer success to operate in this different way, right? It's not about just throwing a blanket statement about it. It's about seeing what actually needs to happen in order to make our customer successful. And this is what's interesting. The current way was right for a time. This additive way of thinking about it was right. But we've been measuring customer success. It doesn't drive profitability the way it should. And so our actions don't result in that. And what happened is that we were operating as an additive business and it functions as a compound business. And COVID forced us to take a deeper look at this. And that's what I find the most interesting about all this, everything that's happened in our lives in the past, especially when it relates to business in the past few months. The number of CS leaders I've spoken to that have said, we've known we have had to become more operationally effective and efficient. We know we've needed to change the way we do things CS, but it's always been one of those things on my to-do list that has gone to the back burner. And all of a sudden, that action on your to-do list has become the number one priority for CS leaders and for companies as a whole. How can we be more focused on our customers to drive the right actions and be more efficient? How are we going to do this, right? You mentioned, what are we going to do? You said we need, to be top-notch at skills. It's true, right? Someone threw in the chat, you got to do AI, right? Well, there isn't an AI bot that can do all this right now. There's some AI that can support, how we function and make us more efficient. But I came across this video, and we aren't the first to run into this. The quality of this video it's not amazing, but the message is pretty powerful. And so I want to play it for you and just listen to what Steve Jobs has to say about it. Let me know if you can hear myself.
I remember reading an article when I was about 12 years old, I think it might have been in Scientific American, where they measured the efficiency of locomotion for all these species on planet Earth. How many kilocalories did they expend to get from point A to point B? And the condor one came in at the top of the list, surpassed everything else, and humans came in about a third of the way down the list, which was not such a great showing for the crown of creation. And but somebody there had the imagination to test the efficiency of a human riding a bicycle. Human riding a bicycle blew away the condor, all the way off the top of the list. And it made a really big impression on me that we humans are tool builders, and that we can fashion tools that amplify these inherent abilities that we have to spectacular magnitudes. And so for me, a computer has always been a bicycle of the mind.
So the point of this, whether you like Steve Jobs or not, is the concept of a bicycle of the mind. It's the concept that as humans, we are actually the least efficient being out there, but because of our use of tools, it becomes this force multiplier for what we are capable of doing. So I'm going to show you some force multipliers that we can do for in CS and for our business. So the first one is be more effective. And your team just can't be good. They have to be the best in the world. They need to get to know your customers better. They need to get to know them faster. And they need to use this knowledge immediately. I'm actually going to show you again, just one example of what I mean by that. So has anyone heard of the tool Crystal Knows? I'm going to show you what I mean by this. So Crystal Knows is a great AI tool. If I look at Dominique Levine, she's one of our co-founders. I go here, it's a plugin to LinkedIn, and it instantaneously tells me a little bit about Dominique. Now let's say Dominique's a new decision maker on my account, right? She just jumped in, she just joined as a new person. Typically in the past, we're waiting for our champion to tell us about her, maybe give us an introduction, but we don't have time for that. And we don't have the ability, we're wasting efforts, and sometimes our champions are gonna block your CSMs from actually ever getting in front of this person. So your CSMs need to have the tools and the skill set in order to go and introduce themselves and reach out on their own, okay? So Crystal Knows tells us a little bit about Dominique and what we need to know. Okay, and we need to call Dominique. And what do we need to do with her? we need to, let's say we need to deliver bad news. Everyone knows needs to deliver bad news once in a while. Let's get some advice. Okay, so here are some things that we should do in order to deliver this advice for Dominique. It gives us some really quick insights that we can use immediately. Let's see how let's see how effective this is, Russ. Are you ready? Did you accept me as a, okay, you did. Let's see how good of a tool this is and see how accurate it is. Okay, we're gonna plug it in.
I'm excited for this.
It's super creepy, actually, when you take a look at it. All right, you tend to be bold, direct communicator, big picture.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate.
Accurate, huh?
Yeah.
So Crystal knows. After this conversation, one thing I encourage all of you to do, which you're probably all doing now, but please wait until after the conversation. I challenge you to look yourself up and you will be totally freaked out. Okay, so this is a really great example of, using a tool to make your team, faster, quicker, and using this knowledge immediately. The other thing, okay, so we talked about the Sales 101 playbook. Sales is stealing all our customers to try and get that revenue from them. Why don't we steal some of their tools, right? Let's take their training money. Let's take their tools in order to help our CSMs perform better. Okay, so this doesn't happen in CS. Maybe they have Gong or Chorus or recording tool. Maybe they're doing some call reviews. When I say they need to do this effectively, I'm talking about an hour or two every single week where you do call reviews, you talk about best practices, and then you do role plays. Role plays is the only way to effectively learn how to perform in your calls. And you focus on these isolated skills, right? You do one part, I've talked before about how in EBRs we're not demoing properly. We're just showing the functionality. We're not doing what they call in sales discovery, right? So we need to teach our CSMs how to do that. It's not about being, slimy sales professionals. It's about being effective communicators, about understanding the impact that our customers are looking to achieve and showing them how our products can help them achieve their goals. The next is actually one of my favorites that I've been using a lot lately and our clients have been using. We have to be more efficient, and how to do that, you can't always rely on and always having in-person meetings, because when you always have these in-person meetings, what happens is you have to align everyone's schedules. When travel was happening, right? If you were having an in-person meeting, that would anchor your day. You'd all of a sudden lose a whole day to travel, but also you'd have to coordinate with other people who are traveling and whatnot. Video is such an effective tool to create what we call asynchronous meetings. And what that means is you share a report or you share something. Let's say you're doing an EBR meeting and you want to get the executive in the room, but they're just not available. So you record it and then you send it over to them. Or you actually record yourself presenting it. You don't even record the meeting. You just record yourself highlighting a few of the key slides, the key moments that you want them to get across in a 2-minute video, and then send it to them. This is a tool I've been using with Soapbox. It allows you to screen share while you're talking, and you can actually show your face, you can just show the screen, and you embed it into your email. It's incredibly effective, and it allows for things to happen on the customer side of the business on their own time. And so when you talk about, how often are we spending times on our monthly check-in calls? Those are sometimes the most ineffective meetings that we have because we have them because they're calendared. But what if we change those and we create an impact report? And instead of having a meeting that lasts for an hour or half an hour, we send them an impact report with a 2-minute video highlight of how they achieved and what they can do differently. And we send that to the whole, all the core people that are responsible or impacted by what your product does. And now all of a sudden they're seeing that and they've spent 2 minutes reviewing that video on their time, and they're getting that insight and they're seeing the value that you're providing. So these are some of the examples of ways that you can use tools to help your teams really excel in, in online skills and otherwise. And these small improvements, as we talked about, the incremental improvements, being more efficient, making every single touch point you have with the customer drive impact, is going to make a huge impact over time. And that is going to be, you continue to increase the number of periods, the number of time they're staying with you. And that compound effect has a huge impact on your profitability. So to sum things up, nothing's new, right? We started what was in this box. We thought it is additive. But what we realize is that customer success operates in a compound. And it's not about seeing something that's never been seen before. It's just about seeing it in a little bit of a different way. So to tie it back to our Penrose staircase, right? We're not all walking around in circles. We've all figured out how to build real staircases that can get you up to the second floor or the third floor. And that's a framework, right? Now anyone can build now anyone can use a framework to build a staircase. This is the framework by which you build a staircase to get to floor 2. I've just shown you a framework to build a staircase that can get you to 10 million or 100 million or $1 billion. And it's all about, creating these frameworks for your teams in order to build on. We really trust, this is the basis at Winning by Design that we rely on, that we do all of our, all of our methodology, all of our work with our clients. It's all based on science. If you actually pull up your camera and you just show up on your phone and put it at the screen right now and at the QR code, you can it'll take you to our YouTube channel where you can see some of the frameworks that we provide. And that's how we can help you make a compound impact. It starts off with a scientific approach. And with that, we can take you to 100 million and beyond. So thank you so much for the great conversation that we've had already. I've saved some time so that way we can open up to some questions. Russ, have you seen anything that I've missed? Yes, the soapbox that you're seeing, the 2 links that Serge you shared are the 2 plugins that I've talked about.
That's awesome. Julie, thank you so much for that. That was amazing, super insightful. Really appreciate you sharing your insights into that. I think, as we discussed at the beginning, it was, it's one of these overlooked areas that I think people got to spend more time investing in. Instead of the endless pursuit of new logos, as you kind of highlighted at the beginning. So, if anybody does have any questions, though, let's just pop them into the chat here, and we can, answer those as they come in. I had one. Let's wait for a couple more questions to come in. One was just around some of the KPIs that help you deliver against kind of the science you were talking about there. Do you have some of the best KPIs to help get people to start thinking about it in the right way?
Yeah, so we need to, if we go back, actually, let me just even show it for a second, because I think it shows it in a better way. Give me a sec. So if we go back to, give me a sec. If we go back to this slide where I can just pull up the stages of sort of those components that are in customer success, that conversion rate one. I'll just show it here. You look at, so something that we often don't necessarily measure in customer success, but I think is a really important KPI, it's actually how many customers are getting through successfully onboarding or getting to that first value moment. And what time, how much time is that taking, right? So remember thinking about if it's a monthly product at $30 or $100, they need to be onboarding within 30 days and achieving first value. If it's a more expensive product that includes, a lot of people, if it's $100,000 or $500,000 product with lots of decision makers, right? Sales cycle is probably 12 to 18 months. It's going to take a bit of time to implement, but you still need to track that onboarding. You need to be tracking the number of customers that successfully make it, and also the time to first value, because that's going to be predictive to how successful they are in the long term. Then you actually look at CR6. That's going to be your churn metric. That's going to be retention. So how much revenue do you save? And then you look at CR7 on the expansion business. And then you're continuously looking at the number of periods. It's a brand new way of thinking about KPIs in CS. Like I'm constantly being shown, oh, my KPIs are around, definitely we get an NRR number or a GRR number. We get that. We also tend to get things like net promoter and whatnot, but we want to look at, these are the metrics, we've studied them. They are going to be truly predictive to the success of your business. And if you're wondering why I'm starting at CR5, which I don't know if anybody is, but I'll tell you why, because this is after the close. CR1 through 4 is before the close, right? If you look at MQL to SQL, SQL to demo to close, those are the first 4 of this conversion rates. And if we look at all of those, there's 7 key moments. And actually, if you actually increase each one of those by 10%, you end up doubling your revenue. That's another conversation for another day.
And borrowing more from the sales side of it, we always talk about how sales has shifted for KPIs, measuring behaviors as opposed to outcomes. And you can see how you can apply some of that to some of the things you talked about in terms of speed to onboarding, speed to first communication, speed to first use, speed to how many features they used within the first month. Those types of behavioral KPIs are the leading indicators of the success that is going to be your conversion or your retention rate.
Absolutely. And it all works cohesively as well. So one thing that we're finding is that if you're CR7, right, or let's call it your CR6, let's say your retention number isn't where it needs to be. You can look at that number, but sometimes you also have to look at your CR2 or CR3, right? How many leads are you closing? And are you closing the right deals? I was working with a customer a while ago. They had, one of the best quarters of their life, right? And everyone they raised a new round. I'm telling you, it was massive. They raised a new round. Everyone was getting promoted. Their sales team doubled. But a quarter later, none of those customers onboarded. It was crazy. It was just and then, they were, so they had a trailing effect of onboarding, and then a whole bunch of them didn't renew. And then you're looking at well, what's wrong? And you're looking at CR6 and you're saying, we have a churn problem. Well, if you focus on that being a churn problem, then you're actually looking at the wrong thing, and you're always going to have a churn problem. But if you go up to CR3 or CR4 and look at what happened with that cohort of customers, you can actually realize that unless you change what's happening at the beginning, you're not going to impact what's happening at number 6.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's super helpful. I got one question just coming in here, just talking about some definitions and big pictures around the CR elements, so the customer retention elements. Do you guys share any of that on your site?
Yeah, we do. Take a look at our site. I can take a look at, if you remind me later, I can try and share, find a good article. But honestly, if you just look at our blog, we actually break down a lot of this stuff. If you look at our framework, the bow tie funnel, and we definitely, we define what each of these CR metrics are. So this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Was there any other questions coming through? Is there standard CR grouping?
Yes, this is it.
Thanks again for everybody for joining us today. Keep an eye out for our upcoming webinars next week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
I need some traction.